that level. I hope that clears that up for the member.
Chris Farfoy.
Thank you very much, Mr Chair, for offering me the chance to speak to Part 3 of the Electronic Identity Verification Bill. As I said in my contributions in Part 1 and Part 2, it's absolutely fundamental that if we're going to roll this iGov system and expand it out through what is already existing, that the public need to have 100% confidence in the security and the monitoring, and also the consequences if the laws as they stand or as they are proposed, if they are transgressed. And there is grounds for serious concern within the public because of the number of recent glitches in security of private information that we've seen in a number of government departments. Of course, there has been most recently NovaPay, where the instances of private details, NoPay I should say, NovaPay, where instances of private details of teachers have been forwarded onto schools where they do not work. There was a case with ACC where over 6,000, the details of over 6,000 individuals were sent to one individual. There has been the case of the Inland Revenue Department and 7,000 individuals affected there. And then, of course, we had the Ministry of Social Development and the cases of the kiosks, where one individual was able to access quite a lot of sensitive information. And I do want to talk about that in respect to Parts 1 and Part 2, and especially around access, and then the provisions in clauses 56 to 60, I believe, which cover the penalties if someone is found to improperly access information that is held within this realm. And Mr Chair, during Part 2 I did ask the Minister in the Chair for some assurances, given the concerns that would be out there in the public at the moment around security and whether or not this government department, the government departments involved in this legislation have done enough to assure the New Zealand public and the Minister that the information involved is safe. I also asked the Minister and the Chair what level of monitoring is going to be carried out, given the fact that I believe in the case of the MSD, there were some flags raised about 6 months before the issue, or a year I think it may have been, before the issue was highlighted in the media, and nothing was done, publicly at least, from the time that was raised privately till when the issue was raised by citizen journalist Keith Ing. And I think if it's still possible to get a reply from the Minister and the Chair about the level of monitoring, that would be good. But I did want to also, because I mentioned Keith Ing, want to ask the Minister and the Chair also if there was any talk or any possibility, because the Part 3 sets out the offences of accessing the information and the penalties, whether or not in the case of Keith Ing there might be some kind of protection for people who, like a blogger or a citizen journalist, is accessing this information because they believe there is a potential gap in security. And the only way for them to find out whether or not there is a gap in security is to do what Keith Ing did, and to go into that Work and Income Office and access the information to see if he could access it. But from my reading of the bill as it stands, there doesn't seem to be any protection for that, for anyone who, with good intentions and no malice, goes in to access this kind of information. But it's just something I wanted to throw out there, because given the nature of the area we're talking about, and it is a digital, we're talking about digital storage, the expertise for these kinds of things, as we've seen in the last couple of months, to try and test it or hack the information, doesn't necessarily rest within the government departments, because they couldn't find the security gaps or the security lapses that existed for some time. It took someone external to test the system to see if there were some gaps. So we've got a case where there may be a third party who may have a little bit of knowledge about a potential threat to the security system, does what Keith Ing has done, has gone in, accessed that information, and with no malice, it has actually gone to the authorities and to the media about a potential security lapse. And I'm just wondering if the Minister and the Chair could elaborate as to whether or not, because of this nature, because I'm no technology guru, but because of the expertise that lies in this area might not necessarily be within, Mr. Chair.
Chris Farfoy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The expertise in this area may not lie in the government departments, may lie with those who are better technically advanced than those within the department, that if they do test it and find a lapse in security, whether or not there will be some protection within the law as it stands now to protect that person, because they've actually done the public a good service by highlighting the issue of a security lapse. And hopefully the Minister and the Chair has taken one call to answer a question of Dennis O'Rourke, and it would be good if I could potentially get a reply to that. Mr. Chair, there are some penalties, both monetary and also in terms of imprisonment, that are contained within clauses 56 to 60. If someone commits an offence, and which is set out in clause 56, they are liable for an imprisonment term of not exceeding 10 years, a fine not exceeding $250,000, or if it's an organisation, a fine not exceeding $1 million. And I think Dennis O'Rourke talked about the level of penalties within 58.4, and he was answered by the Minister. But I've also, in that time, had a chat to my colleague, the Chair of the Government and Administration Select Committee, Ruth Dyson, and she said that during that Select Committee process, which was some time ago, I understand, that the level of punishment and the penalties that are contained within the bill were debated, and they thought that it was appropriate to have the level of punishment as it is set in the bill as it stands. Mr. Chair, also clause 58 looks at an issue that I highlighted in part 2 of the debate, which was around access, and relates to offences relating to improper access of the information that is held on the service database. And that also too does carry penalties of imprisonment for an individual of a term not exceeding 2 years, a fine not exceeding $50,000, or for an organisation, a fine not exceeding $200,000. So I guess that does answer some of the questions that I posed in part 2 of the debate as to around the monitoring and what kind of penalties would be carried out if someone was found to be improperly accessing the database. And in terms of improper access, there is serious concern, and I just do again want to highlight the concerns that there will be out in the community about the level of security around private information. It is a serious concern, it is a real concern, and as many people have pointed out, the journey of this bill may have been slightly different if it had happened in the context of recent events, and I think there would have been much more scrutiny around protections that the DIA and other agencies could offer around the security of information, given we've had a series of serious blunders, I guess you could call it, around the security of privacy information from the government in the last year or two. So, Mr. Chair, as I just wanted to reiterate, public confidence is absolutely essential to make sure that the iGov rollout and expansion beyond what is already in place is a success. There is concern amongst the community because of WINS and ACC and IRD and the Education Ministry's glitches with the security of private information recently. I would like the Minister and the Chair to potentially answer some of the questions that have been posed, just in reminding the Minister and the Chair about maybe that one issue of the likes of citizen journalists or bloggers who may expose glitches in this system having some protection from prosecution. Whistleblowers, if they do highlight glitches in the current system, whether or not they potentially have any information, if they with no malice do highlight some shortcomings of the current system.
Chris Ockenvold.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is, as always, a pleasure to debate these matters with